One day after work, I went home, or where we were staying in London, and my wife said, call your agent. Your agent called. So I called him and he said, are you sitting down? I said, no, why? He said, you better sit down. I said, why? He said, you've just been offered the lead in Stanley Kubrick's next film. I had no idea that I was being considered. I never met anyone from the film. I never met Stanley. Didn't meet anybody. I just suddenly, out of the blue, I had an offer.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me. And I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Did you, while working on the film, thought that you would be talking about it 50 years later?
No, never.
What were you thinking when you were making?
You know, can you imagine if you were to have interviewed the actors that were in Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, would they have guessed that they could be studied, they would be studied in film school 75 years later? No, I mean, I knew that because of Stanley, I knew I was in an extraordinary film. I felt it was absolutely extraordinary, but maybe just for that year or for a few years, but how do you know? You could never know a thing like that.
Can you explain it?
I think, you know, this isn't just a science fiction film. The best way that I can begin to explain it is to paraphrase Stanley Kubrick, who said once to someone who asked, what is this film about? He said, how do you explain a Beethoven symphony? You can't. You experience it. And your experience may be completely different than mine because you bring a whole different persona to that experience. At the time it premiered, somebody heard this nun, religious nun, say it was one of the most religious experiences that she had ever had. And then there are atheists who said this is one of the great films. So who's right? They're all right.
They're all right.
They're all right.
Stanley, he didn't want to talk about the meaning of his film, but not to you either.
No, because all we had to do was deal with the mundane level of what was going on with these characters. You know, the other actor, Gary Lockwood, playing Frank Poole, and myself playing Dave Bowman, we're dealing day to day with a routine. That's why there's so little dialogue. We've been in space for months. There's not a lot to talk about. We know each other quite well. We don't have to say, how are your parents doing? Or how is it? And what we do every day is the same, even with talking with Hal, the same thing. And it's only when things begin to go wrong that there's some different activity. But even then, there isn't a lot of dialogue. And, well, the whole thing is such a visual experience.
And talking about Hal, the scenes, did you play them with another actor, or how were those?
Well, Stanley was very unsure of the voice for Hal. First, he was thinking about Martin Balsam was a well-known actor at the time. And then Stanley said, no, his accent's too New York. And then he hired a British actor by the name of Nigel Davenport, who was there the first week. And he very quickly said, no, it's too British. So he said, I'll worry about it in post-production. So he just turned to his assistant director. And of course, the crew was entirely British. So his assistant director, Derek Cracknell, was British, and he was the voice of Hal for us. And his voice was a little like Michael Caine. It sounded like this. Oh, I can't do it now. It's all like this. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, it was a little Cockney accent. You know what I mean?
Very Cockney, yeah. And you had to play with that.
Yes, that took acting.
All right, Hal. I'll go in through the emergency airlock.
Without your space helmet, Dave, you're going to find that rather difficult.
Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors.
Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Hal? 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 Hal?
He was so successful in portraying the future that many things have not yet happened. I mean, we haven't quite gotten to artificial intelligence as portrayed, almost, but not quite. I'm sure we will, but many things have come true. For example, the iPad that we see, Skyping, et cetera, et cetera.
And in the end, what would you say that this film has brought you, or maybe hindered you in a way?
Not the way other things have helped me. I mean, strangely enough, people kind of, it's the thing, I've done 30 feature films in my life, and doesn't matter how many things I do, and I've been on Broadway many times that I'm very proud of. My theater work is what I love the most. Live theater is what I prefer. I've had wonderful times on films, 2001 being an example. People, I think, still, if they think of me for one thing, it's usually, but listen, if I'm only thought of for one thing, you could do worse.
You could do a lot worse.
Truly.